Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to thank and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Hi everyone, and welcome to On the House, the Household Management Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Gabriella Yastra, coming to you from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's begin.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the show. Our wardrobes are a collection of diverse textiles, each with its own unique care requirements. From delicate silks to durable denim, understanding the specific needs of different fabrics is vital for ensuring the longevity of our clothing. So in this episode, we'll be exploring the world of fabric-specific laundry care with the guidance and expertise of textile artist Leah Giblin. Also a textile consultant and costume designer, Leah has worked on not only textile and costume projects with artists, but also large-scale textile artworks for Carriageworks, Performance Space, and Sydney Opera House. With a focus on sustainability and reducing textile waste, Leah has taught workshops on mending, natural dyeing, and upcycling. So we're incredibly fortunate to have her here with us today. Welcome to the show, Leah.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So before we begin, just to get to know you, can you tell us a bit about your background and what sparked your interest in textile work?
Absolutely. Well, I grew up in a very crafty, textile-y house. There was always sewing around me and always craft, actually, and everything I could dream of to make whatever I wanted. So I initially fell in love with textiles, though, through my dress-up box collection, which I was absolutely obsessed with as a child. It was full of my mum's kind of sparkly Indian hippie dresses from the 70s. And as I grew up and learned to sew, I started chopping up those clothes and remaking them into the things I wanted to wear. I grew up in the country, in a smallish country town, so I found that I wasn't seeing what I wanted in the shops necessarily. So I figured out how to make it myself.
Yeah, that's a fantastic introduction. I was actually just recently in the country and in country New South Wales, actually kind of in the south. And I also love what you say about like learning to sew. I wish that I was a bit better so that I could do what you do and make my own things. So that's a great introduction to our topic. But before we get further into it, we'd like to get to know you a bit better. So this is our segment, Have You Met Leah? First of all, what do you like to do in your spare time?
I like to go down for a swim at my local beach. I live in Coogee in Sydney, so I'm pretty lucky that I can run down for a swim. I also love reading, and sometimes I will just stitch things for fun. So I often will have a little mending project or embroidery project on the go. That keeps my hands nice and busy.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to keep my hands busy with knitting sometimes, but I'm not very good.
Yes.
So
you might be better than me, though. I feel like I can do everything apart from knit.
Really? Fair enough. Well, you mentioned reading there as well. Do you have a favorite book that you could recommend?
I love Helen Garner's books. She's an amazing Australian author. And my other favorite book is a book by Patti Smith, the singer, called Just Kids, which is all about the music scene in New York when she was young. I love that book.
Wow, that's really cool. And are you listening to any podcasts at the moment?
You know what? It might seem completely opposite to what I do as my career, but I love true crime podcasts.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely obsessed with them. So while I'm in my studio sewing beautiful things, I'm listening to some pretty dark crime stories. It seems to they balance each other out very, very nicely.
Yeah, for sure. No, I totally agree. True crime it draws you in, I think.
That's right. That's right.
My next question for you is, do you have a role model? This could either be personally or in your professional life.
I feel like a lot of the women in my family who are amazing makers and craftspeople are my role models. I also work at the University of New South Wales now in the textiles department, and it is an incredible department full of people with absolutely incredible skills and knowledge when it comes to textiles. So, yeah, there's a lot of people in there who I want to be when I grow up.
Yeah. And I mean, you mentioned the university. Is there a course or a class that you've taken or maybe even taught that has inspired you?
Yes, I feel like all of them are really inspiring. The textiles fundamentals course, like the first number one textiles course, is incredible. It's a big focus on sustainability and reusing materials. So I find that really inspiring. And the things that the students come up with in that course are absolutely mind blowing. One of them, who's just graduated, has figured out how to stretch plastic pallet wrap into yarn and weaves it into structures. So they're constantly blowing my mind with their creativity.
Wow, that is really cool. I would love to see that happening and see the weaving of that. That sounds really
Yeah.
amazing.
Come and
So,
visit us.
yeah, I would love to. So, we're now going to dive into our topic for today, and let's just get a few of the basics down firstly. So, for starters, how would you define household management?
I think it's about being smart with what you do in the house so that you're not wasting your own time, you're not wasting money, you're not wasting energy or resources, and making your life a little bit easier, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, how would you define laundry care then and its relationship to the household management that you just mentioned?
I think laundry care is a critical part of household management because it's the difference between your clothes lasting and not lasting. So, if you get that right, your clothes will last a whole lot longer. You'll spend less money buying new clothes, and you'll be caring really well for what you have. I also find you're saving money on detergent and time along with that. So, doing it efficiently and doing it with a bit of knowledge can make a massive difference.
Yeah, well, hopefully we can gain some of that knowledge from you today. Can you tell us a bit about what are the common different types of fabrics that are used in clothing and household textiles most commonly?
For sure. We can break fabric types down broadly into three groups. So you can think about natural fibers. So that is fiber that might come from an animal like silk or wool or cashmere, or fiber that comes from a plant. So those you're thinking like cotton, linen, hemp, those kind of fabrics. Then you've got a group of fabrics that are semi-synthetic fabrics. So a lot of clothes now are being made out of viscose, acetate, rayon fabrics like that, Cupro. So they come from a natural material, mostly wood pulp, and they're processed into fabric using chemical processes. And then you've got your fully synthetic fibers. So that's the third group of fibers. So those are the polyesters, the nylon, spandex, acrylic, those kind of fibers. So broadly, yes, three groups of fibers.
And so, in what ways do the properties of such fabric, such as fiber content and weave, affect their care requirements?
It makes a massive difference. So it's really, really, really important to know what fiber you are wearing and what fiber you're what fiber you're caring for before you go to wash it. I always say, my top tip, my number one golden rule with caring for clothes and textiles is to check the tag. The fiber type is always listed there, and different kinds of fibers need different care. The best thing to do is first to follow the instructions on that tag. They are specific to the fiber type.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what do you think are some common misconceptions about fabric care that people often have?
Look, I feel like it's quite common not to know what kind of fibers we're wearing, not to look at the tags, which is fair enough. But it definitely, in terms of care, isn't one size fits all. So I think the misconception is that we can throw everything we own into one washing cycle and be done with it. But doing that definitely reduces the life of your garments. So yeah, I say always number one is to check the tag and follow the instructions. And then we can go through a little bit more about what each fiber type needs in terms of care.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to dive a bit deeper now into some of these questions. So my next question for you is, what are the key factors to consider when choosing laundry detergents and fabric softeners?
Okay, well, I'd say number one is that simple is best. I think in terms of allergies and the chemicals we're putting into the environment, we often don't need much in terms of our detergents, in terms of fragrances and whiz bang kind of chemicals that are added to it. So I always go for the plainest non-fragranced detergent. I follow the instructions on the box, or even use a little bit less and add a little bit of bicarb soda in. And I add my own fragrances. So I use plant-based essential oils to add smells in if I want the smells in, or if that's something that's important. That's really easy to do yourself. But I would say number one, simple is best in terms of detergents. And in terms of fabric softener, I wouldn't even use them. That's my recommendation. They are petroleum-based chemicals that you're adding back into your clothes. So it's oil basically that you're putting into your clothes.
So there is actually a lot of talk about fabric softeners being non-essential. What's your opinion on that?
I absolutely agree with that. I don't think they're essential at all. I feel like they are pretty chemical heavy. They're petrochemical based oils that you're putting into your clothes that reduce the water absorbency and actually make your clothes less clean over time. So they accumulate stains more easily. If you use it on towels, they won't dry you as effectively. So and again, there's a lot of chemical fragrance added to fabric softeners that just are not great to be having on your skin or in the environment. If you want your clothes to be soft, you can add a cup of vinegar into the wash, which is a natural fabric softener. Or otherwise, loosening fibers up with your hands as well. So if you've got a kind of crispy, dried towel and you rub that through with your hands for a little while, it will do the same job as fabric softener and use a whole lot less product and a whole lot fewer chemicals and still be soft.
Yeah, that's amazing advice. So you also mentioned that you were using potentially a little bit less laundry detergent than what's indicated on the packaging. What's your thoughts on that?
I'd say a lot of people add a little bit more detergent than what the package says. And I would say to that, you could halve the amount of what the package says and it will still clean your clothes effectively. And as I said before, often if it's a question of fragrance or hygiene, adding plant-based essential oils in, like eucalyptus oil, for example, is a great bacteria killer, and it's natural. So that's how I wash my clothes, and they smell great and they are really clean. It's still an effective cleaner with less detergent used, therefore saving you money.
Yeah, perfect. And what can we do to identify the best care instructions for specific garments? Now, I know you mentioned, obviously reading the tag and it will tell you the fibers, but if you have a label that's missing or unclear, what's the best practice?
Yeah, so again, like even if the label is missing, it's really good to try your best to identify what that fiber type is. Every different fiber type has a different profile in terms of like the care it needs. So cotton, for example, your cotton t-shirts and denim is usually a really high percentage of cotton, can withstand pretty harsh treatment. So heat is fine for cotton. You can put your washing temperatures up quite high if you've got dirty clothes, and agitation is fine as well. Whereas that kind of treatment for wool, for a wool jumper, say, will be the absolute opposite of what it needs. So when you're dealing with wool fibers, you want to be really careful not to temperature shock the wool. So we always we go for lukewarm water when we're washing wool, or just using cold water. We want to treat our wool really gently, so we don't want to agitate it very much. And you want to be using like wool specific detergents, really, which are a little bit more gentle, and they have a little bit more acidity because wool loves acidity. You can help bring your acidity up in a wool wash by adding a cup of vinegar to the rinse cycle. And what that does with wool and silk as well is it'll bring back the gloss of your jumpers. So, when you buy a new jumper and it's really beautiful and glossy and soft, that comes back with a little bit of vinegar in your rinse wash. The same kind of treatment goes for silk. So again, it's about not shocking the temperature, not agitating too harshly, and using a gentle detergent. The other things, they're the most, I guess they're the ones that people are scared to wash because it feels like you're going to wreck your clothes. But really, if you just understand that there are rules for wool and there's different rules for cotton, then you'll be absolutely fine. They've been hand washed for as long as we've been using wool products, which for humans is for forever. So don't be scared of washing your woolens or your silks. Unless the tag says dry clean only, then you should follow those instructions unless you feel really confident that you're going to be knowing how to do the right thing for those fibers. The other things with synthetics, I would say not to be using a hot wash. The hot wash does limit the lifespan of polyester garments. So the best thing to do for those is to cold wash and do a really full wash so that you're reducing the agitation of each piece separately. I would also say if you can wash your polyesters in a guppy bag or a garment bag, those bags you can buy that have a zip at the top. They are fantastic for washing your polyester or synthetic fibers in so that they're not releasing microplastics into the waterways. Super easy to use and super easy to empty after the wash into the bin so that you're making sure you're not causing any pollution.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. We definitely have a lot of those bags at home to make sure that everything's nice and contained as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And great, those bags are also really great for your underwear and your bras and anything that's got elastic in it so that it doesn't get stretched around other things in the wash and distorted out of shape. That kind of thing is going to reduce the life of your elastic. So put it into a garment bag. It's super easy, and you'll at least double the time that you'll be able to keep those items.
yeah, that's fantastic advice. So we've talked about wool, we've talked about silk, and we've talked about our polyester. When it comes to other delicate fabrics like cashmere and maybe linen, what special consideration should be made for those?
So cashmere, I would use the same techniques as I would with wool. So you want to be careful not to be using very hot temperatures. You want to be keeping agitation to an absolute minimum, and you want to be using a gentle wool wash detergent. In terms of linen, I think you don't want to be using too hot of a wash with linen, and linen can handle a hot wash, but it does tend to weaken it faster over time. So if you're cold washing it, again with a nice full load of other items, then you're going to be reducing the agitation and reducing holes coming up in say your linen sheets or things like that. I'd also say with linen and with our semi-synthetic fabrics, so fabrics like viscose or rayon or acetate, not to put them in the dryer. Because what happens then is that those fibers become really brittle, and you might have felt, an old garment when you can like literally put your finger through the garment and it kind of crumbles to the touch. That's what happens over time with heat and those kinds of fibers, is that they will end up snapping.
Yeah, interesting. So you also mentioned before about hand washing wool and not to be afraid because it's been done for as long as human history has been around. Do you have any advice for hand washing delicate items without damaging them?
Yeah, absolutely. I I save a day in the week to do this. Maybe not every week, actually. That's probably overstating it. But I have a day where I get all of my delicates together for washing. So I collect them all. And then I get my bucket on the floor of the laundry and do them one by one. So I always use lukewarm water. I put the item into the water and put again with your woolens and your delicates, use less detergent than it says on the packet. I usually just put one capful of the detergent in. It doesn't need much. And then make sure that's really nicely dispersed in your water. And then what you're doing with woolens and silks is just gently squeezing it through the fibers. So there's none of this kind of agitation where you're rubbing the fiber against itself. You're just encouraging the water to move through the fibers really gently and to get some of that detergent through the fibers. If you feel like they're really in desperate need of a really good wash, I would actually leave it to soak for at least 2 hours, or sometimes I leave things in the bucket overnight, and that absolutely won't hurt them. And then after the soak, you can gently tip the water out of the bucket, add some more lukewarm water. At this point, it's really important not to be adding very, very hot water or very, very cold water. Again, it's not wanting to shock the fibers with anything very different to what they've been sitting in. That kind of shock can cause things to felt. So you just want to go back in with your lukewarm water. And at this point, with woolens and silks, I add a cup of white cleaning vinegar into my rinse. And then I just do the same thing, like really gently squeezing the water through the fibers. And then you're tipping your water out, giving it one more rinse. And hanging it up to dry. And with these items, I wouldn't hang them up like normal clothes up on the line out the back. I would actually lay a towel out on a clothes horse or in your backyard and lay that item flat on a towel so that no part of it is under strain. And at this point, it's a good idea to kind of lay it out as in shape of the garment as you possibly can, if that makes sense. So if it's a jumper, you want to lay it out so that it's looking nice and flat with the arms out and all parts of it are flat. So it's going to dry in its shape, in the shape that it's meant to be.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. And you mentioned drying there. Is there any other things you should do with your delicate garments in terms of drying, but also in terms of storing them?
Yes, very good question. So with any of your delicates, I just absolutely wouldn't use an electric clothes dryer. That's a sure recipe for felted, shrunken items, or with silks, again, to just be causing a lot of brittleness with those fibers so that they're not going to last very long. So with drying, yeah, I would be always laying these garments flat and making sure there's no strain on any part of them. And for storage, I would always make sure everything you're storing, and this goes for all of your clothes actually, is to make sure they're properly dry before you put them away for the summer or the winter. If there's any kind of damp, I would try to give them a day out in the sunshine before putting them away for storage. I would think about pests when you're storing things as well. So if you have any blocks of cedar wood, or you can make your own little moth repellent bags with dried lavender flowers, and there are quite a few great aromatherapy oils that are good pest resistant oils. Try to do it naturally if you can, but think about that when you're storing things, that you want to put some kind of repellent in there and you want your pieces to be super dry before you put them away. If you're storing silk items or really delicate, precious things, you usually don't want to be folding those, because any fold points end up being weak points if you're storing things for a long time. So try to store them laid out and flat if you can.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so I'd like to move on now to talk about sort of common laundry mistakes and what we can best do to avoid this. What would you say are the most common mistakes, and what are their consequences?
I think the most common mistake comes from just throwing everything into the wash altogether. And I totally understand that people are time poor and it's really hard to kind of think of the best way to do these things and to take the time to do it. But I think if you can it's less than a minute really to separate your precious things, your woolens, your silks, and your colors, then there's going to be a lot fewer laundry disasters. So think about, I'm sure everyone's had a moment where they've dyed all of their white things pink with a red t-shirt or sock. I think that's probably the most common thing, is accidentally dyeing a whole wash a color that it's not meant to be. That kind of issue is fixable, but it takes a bit to get rid of that color. So if you just take the time to separate your colors out before the wash and separate your woolens out, you're going to be avoiding that. And having said that, yeah, so throwing a woolen jumper into a wash with everything else will end up with a shrunken felted woolen jumper. So yeah, good to be careful with your precious things.
Yeah, definitely advice to be careful and take just a little bit more time to take that care into your items there. So you've already mentioned color bleeding there, and I think you mentioned shrinking before. What can we do to prevent those common kind of mishaps and other ones as well, including fading and pilling?
Sure. Another thing, apart from separating your colors, another thing you can do is to wash in cold water. The hot water is what causes color to bleed and destabilizes your dyes. So, washing in cold is a great tip there with color bleeding. What was the other one you asked me about?
Fading and pilling.
Fading and peeling. Yes. So, I would say with fading, this is a really good point actually, is that we just wash too often. And so, if you think about before you wash, does it really need it? Have I only worn this once and am I washing this out of habit, or is it actually really time for a wash? I think Levi's recommend washing jeans only once every 10 wears. So think about other things you can do before you wash. A great one is to turn things inside out and hang them out in the sun. That kills bacteria. It stops smells, and getting some air around it is sometimes all you need to do. There's also some great recipes for spritzers that you can make to freshen things up in between washes. And I'll tell you more about that later, because I've got a recipe in my book that's a good one that we use in the film industry for costumes in between shooting when we can't wash things and we need to freshen them up. So, yeah, airing out and spritzing, and maybe even thinking about spot cleaning things. So just if it's got a splash of something on it, just to clean that one little area instead of throwing the entire thing into the wash. A lot of fading is just coming from being washed too often. The other thing you can do is hang things inside out if you're hanging them outside under the sun so that they're not fading on the outside, or hang things inside or in a shady area to dry. That can prevent a lot of fading. And peeling is something that sometimes isn't preventable in some fabrics. If it's a really low quality fabric, then it might peel the very first time you wash it. But hand washing can reduce that, because peeling is coming from agitation. So it's coming from either, your arms rubbing against the body of a garment, or it's coming in the washing machine from it rubbing against other items. It's very easy to fix peeling. So you can buy fabric shavers to get rid of it and make things look as good as new again. But reducing agitation, so that means washing with a full wash load instead of like washing 2 or 3 items, and or hand washing if you are really worried about peeling.
Yeah, that makes sense. I have a pair of pants that pilled all in one spot because it was where my laptop case was rubbing on my leg. And I was like, why all in one? And then my mum was like, oh, it's your bag.
Yeah.
So
it's the perfect,
there you go.
It's a perfect example of it. It's all about agitation. So wherever is rubbing the most, the pills will pop up.
Yeah. And of course I'm walking like a long distance to get to where I'm going with the bag, and yeah. But luckily we do have one of those fabric shavers, I think, so I need to get that out.
Oh, they're fantastic. I feel like it's also a really therapeutic activity for you to like kind of mow your clothes of pills, and then they come up so beautifully. And
that repetitive motion.
Yeah. And what is more satisfying than that?
Exactly. So my last question for you then here is, when it comes to heavily soiled garments, what's the best washing and drying practices with that? And obviously wanting to get the best results as well.
Yeah. So for heavy soiling, again, it's like thinking about what fiber type are you washing. always, it's really good to treat your stains before they go in the wash with heavy soiling, and to treat them as soon as you possibly can after the issue has happened. So look, if it's oil based, so if you've been cooking and you've splashed olive oil down your front, the best thing to do with that is to put a little spot of dishwashing liquid directly onto the stain, because it will dissolve that oil and fat. You could soak it in a laundry soaker overnight and then just put it into the wash as normal. Usually with the dishwashing liquid, it's fine just to go straight into a normal wash as long as you put a little drop of dish liquid onto the stain. Be really careful with treating stains on things that have a lot of pigment, like a dark colored or very strongly colored garment sometimes can be a bit sensitive with using stain removers. So I would always advise to test somewhere inconspicuous before you're using any stain remover on something that's precious. So my advice with heavy soiling is definitely treat the stains early and quickly, and then get them in the wash.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So, I mean, thank you for sharing all of that. That's all been fantastic advice. I'd like to move on now to our practices and habits segment, which is where I want to ask you, what is a habit that you would recommend practicing when tending to laundry?
I would say number one, I reckon, is to wash only when it's absolutely necessary. So just make that your number one habit. Think before you wash, could be our new mantra, and think about spot cleaning and airing out and spritzing before we get to that point. And then probably number two is to take that few seconds before you throw everything in together to separate out and just make sure you're not throwing things in that's going to cause damage to the rest of the wash or wreck it.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you find that people face any challenges when they're trying to do this practice?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's all about time and time management, and I feel like people don't feel like they have time to do the separating, or even to think about the differences in things and what they would need. Um, I would say it's absolutely worth it because, uh, number one, we throw too many clothes away. So, Australia last year threw 220,000 tonnes of clothes into landfill. And that's a lot of clothes. It weighs the same as not one but two Ruby Princess cruise liners. So it is a massive amount of clothes. And a lot of that clothing is being thrown away because of a stain, or because it's been shrunk in the wash, or because it has a few pills on it. So I would say, to save every household money, to save a bunch of resources and a whole lot of waste creation, it is really worth taking a few minutes before you wash to think about the best way to do it, and to actually also think about what kind of fibers you're wearing, and to be checking tags and noticing that. I think it's a really, really important thing for us to start to be literate about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like you've solved the problem today of being time poor because you've told us to wash less anyway. So,
That's
and
right.
and also giving those solutions of, maybe it just needs airing out or spritzing. It only takes a few minutes. So, hopefully that's some
That's right.
amazing advice for people who find that they are time poor when it comes to washing, that actually
Yeah.
it's not too much effort more at all, and it will mean that you have to wash less anyway.
Absolutely. I've saved you hours and hours.
I mean, I hope so. I think this has been fantastic advice today. And I'd love to move on now to our open mic segment. You already mentioned you had something you wanted to talk about here. So this segment is really your chance to talk about anything you're passionate about. And if you want, it doesn't even have to be related to our discussion so far. So the floor is yours.
Sure. Actually, I'm going to throw in quickly here the recipe for the spritz that I alluded to before.
Yeah.
So that is 2/3 so you get a spray bottle, and you can buy glass spray bottles from Amazon or from probably your local hardware shop. You put 2/3 water and 1/3 vodka into your spray bottle, and then 5 to 10 drops of eucalyptus oil, and then give it a good shake. And that is a fantastic bacteria killing spritz that you can use in between washes. So say for jeans, for example, if you don't want to be washing them until you've worn them 10 times, you can turn them inside out, give them a good spritz around any sweaty areas, hang them out to get a little bit of air outside, and make sure they're super dry before you put them back into your wardrobe. And that'll save you lots of time washing.
Yeah.
Also
amazing.
Makes your clothes smell great, and it does keep moths and bugs away as well. So you could do that with your woolens and your jackets before putting them away for summer as well.
Yeah, that's great advice. And that seems like a pretty easy thing to make as well. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
There's such a fantastic use of our segment to share the recipe there. That's great.
Okay, that's good. And the next thing is I guess to talk about my book, which is all about fabric care and repair. It's called How to Keep Your Clothes Forever, and I can show it here.
Wow, there it is.
There it is. So that's come out in Australia in April this year, and it's come out in the US and the UK this month, so quite recently. So it's available in all good bookshops, really.
Yeah.
It's published by HarperCollins. So if you can't find it in your bookshop, you can just ask your local bookshop to get it in for you. And it's all about how to care for our clothes through their entire life cycle. So it starts with thinking about why you're buying something before you buy it, and whether there's any alternatives or whether you can find it secondhand, into everything I've said today about understanding fiber types and fabric types and how to look after them, and then into mending and repair. And right at the end of the life cycle of clothes, what do we do with them when they're beyond repair? So there's lots of good ideas. There's projects in there and lots of recipes as well. So it's a good one. It's a good guide to have by your side when you're thinking about how to care for your clothes.
Yeah. Amazing. That sounds fantastic. And that will definitely be out everywhere by the time this episode airs as well. I'm not sure when that will be, but as you said, you can just ask to get the book into your shop. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. We are now coming to the end of our podcast, unfortunately. So thank you for joining us. If our listeners want to find out more about you and what you do, where else can they go? Other than, of course, reading your book, which is fantastic.
So they can find me on Instagram at daykeeperscloth. I post a lot of my projects up there, and they are many and varied. And I also sometimes will put up like mending or care tips and tricks. My website as well is a good place to find me, which is www.daykeeper.com.au. And yeah, get in touch.
Amazing. Well, I'll definitely put those links in our show notes so that our audience can find you and look for you there. So Thank you again for joining us. We've now come to the end of our episode. I've certainly learned a lot from you and a lot that is very applicable to my life. I think everyone's life. Just so much fantastic advice this episode. I'm really thrilled about that. So thank you. And I've certainly learned a lot. So I hope that our audience has too. To our audience, thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to On the House, produced by the Household Management Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes like this from across 10 life management perspectives can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and other podcasting apps available on your smart devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people find it so we can grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at hm.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Gabriella Yastra. Thanks for tuning in.